another episode of Inquiring Minds. I'm Steve Harper, and with me as always is my favorite co-host of all time, Donna Carlin. How are you doing, Donna?
You're going to get into trouble with that one.
Yeah, I could get into trouble with my other co-host on my other podcast.
That's right.
But yeah, I just won't send her this one. How about that?
Okay, that works. Works.
I love all my co-hosts equally, but you're my favorite co-host for today. How about that?
For today, how's that?
How's it going?
Our listeners should only hear what we say before we press the tape button, because we cover every topic known to man, every situation in our life known to man before we even get going. So
good thing we don't record, because we'd have the most awesome blooper reel.
That's right.
Well, what are we talking about today?
So I've been doing a lot of reading this week, just for perspective on multiple things. And one thing, a quote by Brené Brown, who I just think the world of, really came to mind that I wanted to discuss with you. And that is, the greatest gift we give ourselves is the permission to ask the questions that linger in our hearts. And because, I'm a shadow coach. I do shadow work. And these are some of the questions that haunt us. Or the questions that, why don't we give ourselves permission to ask what we know we need to ask? Why don't we give ourselves permission to ask out loud, what makes you think that this is acceptable?
Sure.
Or why am I not raising my voice in the first place? What is wrong with me? Rather than that, why am I not standing up, speaking out, tolerating that which I shouldn't be tolerating? All those questions that are lingering, they linger in our hearts. We know they're important to us, and we do nothing about them, including speak them out loud, say them out loud.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have that discussion with you, because how often, I know I do, how often does it happen to you where you go, why in the world am I doing this? Why in the world was I sucked into this? Yep. Which happens a lot less now that I'm older. I'm much better at saying no to things. The thing is, though, even when we say no, there's something that's lingering there that we're questioning ourselves on our right to say no.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting approach, because I do think that you saying it, verbalizing that question, I think is really important, because I do think we have the tendency to be in the loop within our head. So we are asking those questions, but we're really not following it through to answer it truthfully. And that becomes a problem. And I also find it really interesting, the ones that tend to, those questions that we tend to not verbalize tend to have almost always a negative connotation to it, right? It's, I didn't do this, or why is this happening? Or there's a situational emphasis on it that often isn't a positive one. And so I am curious, because in your mind, would these be questions that are that we really need to speak out loud, that do have sort of the thing that we're running from, which is part of the reason we need to bring it out of the shadows and talk about it and really verbalize it? Or is there a balance between the positive, the good, and the bad in terms of the questions that we're really not putting out there? Because I do think we do get in that loop where we may not be paying the full respect to the question that we have that is deep inside. We may be thinking like, hey, why did I put up with this situation yet again? But then you don't give it a passing thought beyond that, right? Other than just in that moment, that little glimpse into the situation. I'm just curious what your take is on that. It's both positives and negatives in these questions, and then what's holding us back from asking those questions.
I was really looking at this from multiple perspectives, especially, writing my book on questions is how can I put this? It helps me answer you in a way that you probably are not going to expect. And that is, it's not about this question. It's all about what is the next question you're going to ask yourself, because it can have negative connotations. Absolutely. It could also have positive connotations depending on what you do with it.
Yeah.
So, and what I mean by that is,
even if it is negative, it can have the positive.
Yeah. That's right. Even if it's negative, like, why in the world am I letting this continue, for example? you know it's like a part of your body, almost to the point that you know that something's unfolding, that you should have a say in stopping or detouring or whatever it is. The next question is, and this is something I do in my work, is this the time to intervene or is this the time to stay silent?
Hmm.
The reason being, there's always a connection of our assumptions to whatever's unfolding, which is why we're asking those questions in the first place. So it's a barometer question in a way to gauge, the wind and where it's going. A lot of people, when I teach, they're dying to ask the next question and the next one and the next one, because they think that they'll be able to get to some kind of
Excuse me.
outcome, so to speak. And sometimes silence is the best way to see what is going to unfold, because more often than not, it will turn itself around
Yeah.
in a way. So sometimes the next question or the answer you're going to give yourself is, because I need to let it unfold to see what the actual story will become. And when that's the case, then you have a different direction to take.
Hmm.
The whole thing is, though, what do you do with those questions that linger in your heart? And most of those are more about um, why don't I have control over this? Why am I accepting this? And even when we accept, inappropriate behavior or whatever else, what we do is beat ourselves up internally and say, why am I letting this happen? Instead of saying, if I let this happen, what is the logical consequence? What do I know in my heart I need to do to address it? So instead of staying in the question that lingers in your heart, ask your heart, what do I really know I need to do, good, bad, difficult, challenging, to address it? And often we don't ask that second question.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really important point. That the fact that we're asking the first question, trying to guide ourselves to ask that second question and be honest in our response, I think is really critical. And we talk a lot about questions on this podcast because they're so important. And I don't think that the majority of us spend enough time in them, and that's the biggest challenge that we
Right.
run into. And so those questions that we're sort of almost kind of hiding from, and that can be true in terms of the positive and the negative, I think, in a lot of respects. But I think being able to be in presence of mind to ask that first question, and then, like you said, that follow-up question, and be honest with yourself about what that answer is, what that next step that you need to take, or how you're going to have that conversation, or you're going to say, enough, I'm not going to tolerate or put up with this behavior anymore, and here's why. I think that becomes a really important aspect to help our audience really figure out, okay, how many of these questions am I really running from in a lot of ways that I really need to pull out. I need to ask, but then I need to ask that follow-up question and say, okay, what is my true action? What's my heart telling me that needs to happen next?
That's it. And we tend to deal with consequences rather than root causes of things
Yep,
as
that's right.
well. And I just find it fascinating. It's a dance, right? Because you're also dealing with other human beings and you don't know what their response or reactions are going to be.
That's right.
Just yesterday, somebody wrote a sarcastic comment on one of my professional social media pages, not my personal one. Somebody I've known for 45 years. And what's interesting was, he thinks he's really, really funny. It's not funny to write like a comment that's going to make people wonder about me.
Mm-hmm.
So normally I would have vented, screamed and yelled like to Ray, not at Ray, and said, why don't people understand that on my professional page, that's not the place to be sarcastic,
Yeah.
because we're dealing with people who don't know me, or those who are avid listeners who might question whether or not they're going to give me the time of day because of your sarcasm.
Yeah.
Uh, but obviously, they don't think of that. They just think they're really cute and funny. So I asked myself yesterday these reflective questions, right? What do I know I absolutely have to do about this? Because if I stay silent, that's condoning it. So I
Yeah.
did. I actually reached out and I said, could you please think twice before posting one of your so called funny comments on one of my professional web pages? Because that just does more harm than anything else. And
Sure.
the answer was, well, if I upset you, I'm sorry. And that does not address what happened. So I said, keep in mind, most of the people who are going to this web page probably don't know me. They might have considered learning more about me so they could work with me. They read something that you write that's sarcastic, that is something I would never, ever, ever do.
Yeah.
And they go, no way I want any part of her. And that's the end of it.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is impacting my reputation, and my entire career and practice is based on my stellar reputation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's more than just being upset. This is the cause and effect of doing something that you find is cute and funny. He didn't remember where he wrote it, didn't even remember what he wrote. And it was literally written 5 minutes before. And I said, that's telling. I
Yeah.
didn't even know that you went to those web pages. However, the question I asked myself was, what will happen if you don't do anything about this? How often will this continue to happen? Because somebody just is bored and just thinks they're funny and cute. Do they realize the implications? I'm not standing up for myself. I don't deserve for anybody to want to work with me.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like with this particular individual, it's happened before, but you finally decided to take a stand, right? Because you've obviously seen a pattern in this person before, thinking that they're being funny or even sarcastic to a point, and obviously this one caught your attention to the point that you stopped, you asked the question, then you asked the second question, and then you took action, which was really key.
He never did it on a professional page, only my personal Facebook
Okay.
or something like that.
But
Would
that's kind of the
comment.
MO. That's kind of the MO you've seen
That's
previously, and
right. Yeah,
now it deviated from your personal side, which is fine to be jokey on that end, but really when it comes down to your professional page, it's a completely different scenario, and you had to nip that in the bud.
that's it. So, what are the questions that we sit with? If I say something, am I going to hurt his feelings? Is it
Yeah,
going to impact their relationship? All the things, here you go with your negative, all the things we might ask ourselves to stop us from doing what we know we need to do,
yeah,
because we're putting up the worst case scenario. So he's never going to talk to me again. I've been friends with him and his wife for 45 years, that kind of thing. And I don't want
yeah,
to screw up the friendship. So, okay, it's one time, it's not, maybe it won't happen again. And all of these, rationalizations. Instead, I had to ask, what do I know I absolutely have to do to honor everything that I've done to create this reputation that I've, had for 42 years in this business.
yeah.
So, and am I going to let somebody through boredom or whatever reason he had to do this really possibly badly impact all that I've built over time with
Yeah.
one stupid comment? So, it's helping me look at social media through a different light, that's for sure. And really, I feel very blessed that we have people who respond on our page in such a wonderful
Yes.
way, to generate, to share, to comment, and they're so respectful of these conversations and everything else that I'm incredibly grateful. Where it could be so much worse.
It could absolutely, without question.
Have you come across that in your world, asking yourself the question that just lingers, that seems to, keep poking you, saying, pay attention to me?
Yeah, I think I fall on the side where I think a lot of people do, which is you ask that question and then you sort of run from the answer. So I think that's you don't really want to ask it, but you do, and you know it what the response is, but you also stop shy of asking the second level question, which is, what are you going to do about it? How's this, how, one of your questions, what's the future version of yourself going to thank you for by taking
Oh,
action, right?
is what I'm
You know,
doing now something my future self
yeah,
will thank me for?
exactly. So
Yes.
it has been a process because it is not something that comes naturally to me because it is, and I think for a lot of people, until you get exposure to these kinds of approaches, these kinds of techniques, this coaching that we're, really bringing to the forefront, I think you don't think about, okay, wait, it doesn't have to stop there. There is another step. There is something else I can do, and it really does require me to take that action to resolve whatever it might be. That could again be, looked at from whether it's a negative situation but also a positive situation. What can I do to build on this? How do I keep my momentum going? How do I take what I just experienced and let the world know about it? Or how do I leverage this in some capacity to really, take a big leap forward in my career? And so I think it's really important for our audience to really reflect on this and then really figure out what those things are that they're not asking themselves that they should be, or if they are, in silence, and really out of sort of the mindset of kind of passing thought, but to really stop. The reason it came up was for a valid reason. That question is a valid one to ask, but then what are you going to do next? What's the next question that needs to be asked in order to not just let it just pass by and tolerate whatever might be happening, or be fearful of ramifications, but actually take that next step to figure out what's going to work for you.
I think the operative words here are linger in our hearts.
Yeah.
And I think what lingers in our hearts are the tougher questions, such as, am I minimizing who I am by staying silent? I think that, that's what those questions that are, you know, just poking us
Yeah.
and making themselves known regularly are the ones that we need to pay attention to. And for some reason, we are not giving ourselves permission to.
Yeah.
And that usually goes to self worth or voice or place in the world, or afraid to rock the boat, or we might lose rather than gain, rather than think I might lose somebody, like lose the friendship. I did end
Yeah.
my comment by telling him I love you anyway. Like, he's a dear friend. I want to throttle you, but I love you. And
Yeah.
that's how I ended it. And he got it.
Sure.
He really got it. Um, I felt good about saying something, and I didn't, call him any names. I just helped him see what the implication of his humor could be and
Yeah.
to pay more attention to it.
Yeah.
That was it. It was honoring myself, though. I
Yeah.
think it's pretty much asking, am I worth, am I giving myself that self-worth by standing up for who I am and what I know I stand for?
Yeah.
That's really the underlying question.
Yep. And it's a good one, and it's a great one to end on, because I want to encourage our audience to really ask that question of themselves. Look at these situations, look at these questions that you really need to be asking, and then asking yourself those follow-up questions, I think, is really, really critical. And I am anxious to kind of hear what people's feedback is on this episode, because it's pretty heavy. It's a heavy topic. It's a challenging topic, I think, for a lot of people, including myself. And I think it will be interesting to see what kind of response we get. So, Donna, how can people get engaged in conversation with us on this episode or any of our prior episodes?
Best way is to join our Facebook group, Inquiring Minds, with Donna Carlin and Steve Harper. Share your 3 cents. Let us know what you think, or if there's any specific topics you'd like us to discuss. We would love to hear from you. And as I said earlier, we honor those who do share their insights, because that really helps guide us in what's next and what we share next on our podcast. Obviously,
Absolutely.
any podcast station, we're on all of them. Just check it out for the audio, and the video is on YouTube. So just join the community.
Yep, absolutely. Get involved, have the conversation with us, give us your feedback, give us your thoughts. And like Donna said, if you've got a topic or too that you'd like us to cover in a future episode, we'd be happy to do it. But until then, we'll be back again with another episode of Inquiring Minds very soon. But Donna, have a great rest of your day.
You as well.
Thanks.